I think we have just gone public, so very warm welcome from my side on behalf of the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development. It's with great pleasure to welcome you to today's event, where we'll be addressing a presentation of IPOS, which is the International Panel for Ocean Sustainability, looking into the scientific keystone behind supporting sustainable ocean policies. And of course, the ocean is key when it comes to the oxygen that we breathe, when it comes to the climate, to nature-based solutions, to energy, to biodiversity or nutritious food. So I think we'd all come to agree on the need to ensure ocean sustainability. And for all that, we need to bridge knowledge gaps. We need to have all the relevant data that we need. We need science. We need well-informed policy making. And we also need to bring all ocean stakeholders on board. So I think to tie the knot, this is really where IPOS comes in and the European Parliament Intergroup comes in within such a great momentum. And I think we'll be hearing more about IPOS as we progress. So with no further ado, I'd just like to give the floor to Ms. Chabaud for officially opening the event.
Thank you very much, Ilias. Thank you very much to the Intergroup. I'm part of this wonderful Intergroup, EBCD, Climate, Biodiversity, Sustainable Development, etc. And I'm the co-president, the co-chair of the Ocean Governance subgroup. So thank you very much. Thank you to Lola also from my team and all my team who is here. Thank you all of you to be here. This event on the International Panel for Ocean Sustainability is also an opportunity for everybody to connect. So I'm very happy to welcome you in the Parliament. I'm especially very honored to welcome Françoise Guy and Tanya Rudolph. And thank you to the CNRS, who is the organizer with us of this event. And I will like to welcome the representative from the CNRS as well. I've been a supporter of this initiative from the beginning. Because, you know, 1 year ago, we voted a resolution on ocean governance here in the Parliament, and we asked for the creation of an international panel for ocean sustainability. I know that the Commission, and I would like to welcome the Commission as well, is also a supporter. And thank you very much to be here. The Council is not represented today. Good afternoon, but they are also a strong supporter, of this initiative. I'm also an admirer of the great lady of oceanography, Françoise Guy, with whom I had the chance to work on initiatives that gather different stakeholders on ocean issues. And I'm also honored to receive this great lady from South Africa that you are a lower, Tanya. And I'm very happy to have a South African lady in the Parliament. So welcome to everyone. It's thanks to Françoise and the scientists I've met over the last 20 years that as a sailor, I've been able to broaden my practical knowledge on the ocean with a more academic approach. This has made me aware of what the ocean brings to humanity, its richness, but also its fragility. It's thanks to this renewed contact with scientists that, and with all those involved in the sea, that I've been able to put forward maritime issues here in the Parliament and in my previous missions. What's more, the legislative framework that we are helping to build needs to be informed by science. You will find the expression science-based everywhere in our texts on many subjects, but we lack a scientific position on many subjects, or even a consensus position sometimes. More in details, we need solid shared data to specify the figures of the general picture of what the ocean is and to enlarge the examples. What is also crucial is to have an integrated approach to these issues, and the interdisciplinary dimension must be able to meet the objectives of the integrated maritime policy, the marine spatial planning, but also the land-sea link. Science must be able to answer the question, is it relevant to develop marine energies in marine protected areas? To develop aquaculture on offshore wind farm? How can we adapt the Water Framework Directive or the Common Agriculture Policy to achieve ocean regeneration? Another example is in the declination of the Green Deal. I'm trying to promote here in the Parliament the integration of the blue carbon in the climate legislation. And since the beginning, I've been lacking figures on the capacity of these ecosystems to absorb carbon, but also on the costs of their restoration, how to finance it, etc. In terms of tools, we need more indicators that allow us to cross-reference the issues. And to talk about a debate that is currently animating us, we need science to specify and stabilize the international framework of marine protected areas, because the IUCN framework is not sufficiently shared. We need to measure the resilience of an ecosystem where bottom trawling has been stopped. At the same time, so we need to the economic and social sciences to trace the trajectory towards sustainable fishing and aquaculture. And I think Pierre-Carl Esquin, who is in a mission in La Réunion, in the island in the south of Indian Ocean, will probably speak about that. More broadly, and it will be my conclusion, I think that like the IPCC reports, policies need a vision of the future, a trajectory, perhaps also to identify a key indicator for the ocean, the equivalent of the 1.5 for the Paris Agreement. This is an overview of the dialogue that we can foster between science and politics, and this event is there to push this dialogue forward. So thank you very much to be here, and I'm very glad for your presence. Ilias, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chabaud, for setting the scene with regards to the important discussion of today's event. And of course, I just forgot to mention that the event is going to be recorded. The recording will be made as well available on our website as of tomorrow. Equally so for presentations that we're going to have at today's event. Last but not least, as we want to have a discussion that is as interactive as possible, participants in the room, feel free to raise your hand and we'll take as many questions as time will allow us during the Q&A session. But of course, for people connected through the online platform, you can also send us your questions using the Q&As box. So moving on into the event's agenda, I'll just like to give the floor to Françoise Gailly for the presentation of the IPOS project.
Okay. So first, I would like to thank you, Catherine Chabaud, who has supported the IPOS in the very beginning and who welcomed us today for this key event at the European Parliament. I also thank the European Bureau for Conservation and Development, the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, and also Renew Europe for their precious support in organizing today this event, which will be the opportunity to present the results of the Seascape assessment, the first volume of the IPOS feasibility study commissioned by the EU DG Mare. And I also would like to thank the representative of the DG Mare for their presence today and for the support for the IPOS initiative. And finally, I would like to thank the invited speakers and the audience for attending this event, and at least the IPOS team. So today we will present the result of this, the so-called seascape assessment, the first result of the IPOS feasibility study, which was commissioned by the EU Commission. As you all may know, the ocean is essential for life and for our life. It moderates the effect of climate change, providing life-supporting services for human well-being and nature, and it's obvious that the ocean is shaping our future. So why an international panel for ocean sustainability? Because today there is an ocean emergency, as said by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, an ocean emergency that we need to address together in a relevant, coordinated, and ambitious way. The idea of a renewal of the science to policy interactions, which is at the heart of IPOS, first originated in 2019 from a seminar co-organized by the CNRS, the IFM, and Catherine Chabaud, regarding the ocean question as a global commons. It was for promoting the BBNG negotiation. It was in 2019. And the IPOS concept itself originated from a meeting with Tanya Brody-Rudolph after the reading of its paper issued from the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy in 2020. Following these two cornerstones, international brainstorming sessions were organized as part of the 2021 and 2022 Monaco Ocean Weeks, and at the IPOS concept was first officially presented at the One Ocean Summit in Brest in February 2022, resulting in the creation of the core group. You have some in the light, Torsten. Thank you to be there. Who drafted the original IPOS paper published for the Christmas. The second United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon was a turning point to position the IPOS at the heart of the international ocean agenda. During the second UNOC, diverse stakeholders, scientific institutions, policymakers, etc., called for the establishment of an international panel dedicated to ocean sustainability. The EU underlined the necessity to study the feasibility and opportunity of an IPOS into the agenda of the European Commission. And EU was the first organization to launch an international ocean governance agenda involving the possibility of an intergovernmental organization for ocean sustainability. Since then, there has been a growing interest in supporting IPOS, resulting in unprecedented international momentum. We had support from scientific institutions, from philanthropic actors, and so on. And for example, for scientific institutions, we have 16 of them who are involved in a coalition, supported also with the thanks of the CNRS. And at the EU level, the creation of an intergovernmental science policy interface for ocean sustainability, aiming at establishing an IPOS promoting ocean diplomacy and literacy was considered. And France, together with Costa Rica, were identifying IPOS as a key deliverable for the 2025 UNOC. Monaco is also supporting the IPOS project involved in the UNOC process. Finally, we have the support for philanthropic actors and private funders like Kering and the CNRS Foundation, for example. And at last, the launch will take place at the United Nations Conference in June 2025. We are building through a collaborative approach. We need to get more scientists and policymakers on board. And we want Europe to be a crucial partner. That's why we're here today to listen to everybody's needs and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guy, for your remarks. Also mentioning why we need IPOS to achieve the ocean that we want. I think that's a very important message today. And you also referred to the seascape assessment. We'll also be hearing about that as we progress. But before that, I'd like to also provide the floor to Mr. Rafael Goulet from DG Mare, also for some opening remarks from your side.
Thank you, Chère Catherine, Chère Françoise, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to address you today. Last week, I attended the second conference of the Marine Regions Forum in Tanzania with stakeholders from the Western Indian Ocean. And this forum, supported by the European Union since 2017, is really helping to strengthen regional ocean governance. We discussed many challenges and solutions related to the ocean, from blue economy enablers to marine biodiversity protection and fight against climate change. But one very clear takeaway was that we need a better science policy interface. And Thorsten, who was there as well, can certainly witness that. The question is, how do we do that? How do we connect the science community to the political community? And how do we ensure that the scientific information on the ocean is understood by our citizens and translated in simple words? The ocean has received the attention of scientists for already quite some time, but the political attention is relatively recent. Various international events show that this attention is growing. We need to keep the momentum through our ocean, UN ocean conferences, and so on. The ocean is also at the center of recent multilateral negotiations, particularly the landmark BBNJ agreement and the WTO agreement on harmful fisheries subsidies. So the ocean is also now included in the international climate change agenda, and two elements have really established a firm connection between the ocean and the climate communities. First, the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. And secondly, the decisions taken since COP25 UNFCCC to convene a dedicated dialogue on ocean and climate change. So we need to keep this momentum at the forthcoming COP28. And the EU supports the inclusion of the ocean in the COP28 outcome, in particular in the global stocktake, to achieve the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. All these international events and multilateral processes have a common denominator: to close gaps in international governance and to protect the ocean. Science is telling us that we are not moving fast enough. The decline of the ocean is accelerating as unsustainable human activities and their harmful impacts continue to degrade the ocean. So, dear participants, science is of utmost importance in informing policy. I guess everybody agrees on that in this room and hopefully beyond. The international science policy interfaces like IPCC on climate change or IPBES on biodiversity have been assembled by the United Nations to monitor and assess global science on climate change and on biodiversity. And the assessment reports result from collaboration of scientists and political consensus. Their reports feed directly into international policy making. The ocean covers 2/3 of the globe, Françoise just said it, but the ocean does not have yet a targeted science policy platform on its own. The ocean seems to fall in between existing structures and is targeted with partial, slow, or exclusive approaches. So in the EU's international ocean governance agenda, we support work towards an intergovernmental panel for ocean sustainability. And as Catherine said, both the European Parliament and the Council are supportive too. So now is the time to move ahead, to build on what we already have, and aim at an IPOS that would synthesize ocean science and knowledge, engage the governments, be inclusive, be credible, and reaching more efficiently the policymakers and the civil society. An IPOS should encourage strategic long-term thinking for the ocean. It should reach across silos between research communities, administrations, or economic sectors. It should inform on the necessary decisions to restore ocean health. And most importantly, it should help ensure that policies are based on the best available scientific evidence. To move on with our commitment on IPOS, as Françoise mentioned, we commissioned a study to map existing science policy organizations, processes, and global ocean assessments. And the study tells us that ocean knowledge production is distributed across processes and organizations in a fragmented manner, and that the connection between the scientific and policy-making communities and civil society remains superficial. And this is a key inhibitor to agile responses for the ocean. Tanya will tell us more, but I can already reveal that the study, the assessment, gives us useful information for next steps. And we agree that an IPOS could provide a new catalytic mechanism to inform public and private decision makers on sustainable use and protection of the ocean. We as well consider the UN Ocean Conference in 2025 as an opportunity to improve the science policy society interface for the ocean. And with this in mind, we launched a call for tenders towards an IPOS. The objective is to support the possible setting up of a science policy society interface for the ocean by activating a global network of key ocean scientists, experts, policymakers, and civil society. And we hope to start the project as early as we can in 2024. We look forward to working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goulet, and it's a real honor to have you with us today. And also it's great news that you mentioned that there is the support, the committed support of all three institutions towards the establishment of IPOS. I think this is very good news to hear from you. So seamlessly, I would like to transition to our next speaker, that is Tanya Brody-Rudolph, for the presentation of the IPOS feasibility study, the seascape assessment that we heard a couple of times already during this event.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are you hearing me? Yes? Great. Thank you for the introduction, Françoise and Raphael. You've set the context very well for us. We have some slides, which would be great if we could. Oh, sure. Yes, there we go. Thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Catherine for this event. It's really an honor to be here to present the results of the seascape. It was wonderful to do this work. I felt very honored by the opportunity to conduct this assessment with a team of people that were supporting, and very excited to present the results to you today. So could I have the next slide, please? We've heard from Raphael and from Françoise that the ocean is pivotal, that the ocean's health is fundamental to achieve global sustainability. It's imperative that we act quickly to restore the health of the ocean. But in order to create change in a system, you need three things. You need political will, you need societal incentives, and you need a comprehensive and cohesive evidence base. We're here today to talk about the evidence base. This is what the seascape assessment objective was, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. So if we could have the next slide. Thank you. We already have some of the context from Raphael, but just to reiterate that the EU recognizes the importance of this building block of science, that it's a fundamental building block for a trajectory towards change. So the EU Commission has signaled interest in the panel, as we've heard, as a key action to fulfill the objective to build up knowledge for the ocean. But before fully implementing this idea, the Commission wanted to understand very well the landscape, the whole ocean policy landscape. So we were commissioned to do this assessment in order to understand whether we have a clear understanding of the ocean and the extent to which this knowledge informs action. I just want to mention the difference between landscape and seascape briefly, because actually this kind of study is a landscape assessment, but after reading so many ocean-related papers, it just seemed counterintuitive to keep talking about a landscape assessment. So it became the seascape assessment, which is why we talk about it that way. So next slide, please. The objectives of the seascape were twofold, and this thread will carry on through the conversation when I take you through the report. The first objective was to analyze the current ocean scientific evidence base provided by global environmental assessments and processes. And the second objective was to evaluate how effectively this knowledge is transmitted into policy action. So in other words, to establish what we know, what is missing, and how is this interface working? And to what extent is it actually achieving what it's intended to achieve? So this is the results of this assessment were intended to demonstrate the feasibility of an IPOS. I just want to reiterate for those who don't know that the focus of this assessment was on the environmental pillar of sustainability, and the social and economic factors will be assessed in the next volume of the Seascape assessment. If we could move on, the next slide, please. So now that we understand the context within which this report occurred, I would like to present to you the scope of work that we did, the assessments we reviewed, the interviews we conducted, and the workshops we held. We reviewed 35 global environmental assessments, and that was quite a task because some of them are thousands of pages. We did 21 interviews with a range of policymakers, stakeholders, some of whom are in the room today, and scientists, chairs of assessments, scientists who wrote these reports. We had an hour with each of these people to get their insights. And then we conducted several workshops around the world to present the preliminary findings, to receive feedback and to hear insights. We had an event in Barcelona, and we have Brian with us here from Live, where we had representatives of small-scale fishing associations with us, and we had policymakers. We had Maria from Digimare. We had scientists, Woods Hole, CNRS, and we had a very interesting and engaging conversation and co-construction workshop. We also had 2 events at the CNRS, one between scientific institutions and one between science and society, and I know some of you were there as well. So this was the scope of the work that we did. If we could, oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention was we had an event at the IOC earlier this year at the General Assembly, just to receive feedback from global and regional processes as well, such as ICIS and PICIS. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide. So how did we approach this task? As you can imagine, with 35 global environmental assessments, we had something in the order of 13,000 pages to analyze and compare. So to have a coherent system, to make any sense of this, we decided to create 2 spreadsheets. The one was just to look at the actual institutional processes and assessments. So for example, the governance, the structure, the decision-making bodies, the timelines. And then the second spreadsheet was the actual content of the assessment. And we very quickly realized as we started this work that we needed to determine what would a perfect assessment look like. What do the best practices say an assessment should look like, so that we know what we're comparing against. So it made sense to create first a list of best practices, an updated comprehensive list of best practices. So we did that. Then we created the 77 criteria. So you can imagine the spreadsheets. We had hundreds of spreadsheets with 77 criteria for each GEA. And it's a very interesting because you can look at one particular aspect and look at all the assessments and see across how each of them perform according to that criteria. Some of the criteria were descriptive. For example, what is the mandate? Which was simple, just to look for certain information. But then some of the others were more qualitative. For example, to what extent does the report on progress towards SDG 14? For the interviews, we used a semi-structured interview process. Because of the nature of the interviewees, we had multiple types of people that we were talking to. So we needed to adapt depending on who we were talking to. But we had 3 primary sets of questions. And we wanted to hear insights and feedbacks from these people at the Science Policy Interface, what their experience of the Science Policy Interface was. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. And then the knowledge co-construction workshops I've already discussed. So to move on to the results, if we could move on to the next slide. So I'm imagining that you are thinking, how on earth would you take all of this information and turn this into something useful to be able to assess this ocean landscape, or this broad seascape? And we decided to do this in 2 kind of buckets, if you would. The first relates to evidence, scientific evidence, which is our first objective of the seascape. And we used a term comprehensiveness of GEAs, which essentially refers to the science. So it looks using the drivers, pressures, impacts, responses framework that most of the GEAs use. And we categorize them. So if you have a look at the table that's on the screen, you can have a sense of how some assessments are very strong. For example, second World Ocean Assessment is very strong in the environmental and ecological data, the darker green, under World Ocean Assessment 2, but it's not as strong in some of the other categories, such as response options. But if you look at, for example, at IPOS, they are very strong in the response options, but less strong in the ecological and environmental data relating to the ocean. So this shows 12 reports, but we have this for all the assessments. And it gives you a sense of how patchy the ocean knowledge is. It's strong in some places and weak in others. Some reports have really detailed information and others have almost nothing or have one topic, which is not that useful for policymakers to navigate. And then the second component is really important. It's around effectiveness. And this is a way of measuring the influence of a global environmental assessment. So if you step back a moment and think, how are we meant to be guided at a global level? These global environmental assessments that we put all this energy into and funding into that take years, like the IPCC reports or the IPOS reports, these reports are intended to guide policy. They're intended to shape the way in which we face the future. So it's important that they're effective because a lot of resources and time go into them. But it's a difficult thing to measure policy influence. So over the years, the literature has developed 3 categories to measure effectiveness. Firstly, an assessment must be legitimate. And this means it must be trustworthy, it must be representative and fair in its processes. And effective needs to be credible, which means the science needs to be rigorous and trustworthy. And it needs to be salient, which means it needs to be relevant for the audience that it's intended to influence. It needs to be something useful for them. When we assessed the reports, we found that no single assessment on its own for the ocean was scored high in legitimacy, credibility, and salience, which is something we need to work on. If we're going to spend money and time on assessments to guide policy, they need to be effective and they need to score high on all of these criteria. Okay, so if we could have the next slide, please. I'm going to just take you through a quick deep dive into some of the results, just to give you more of a flavor for it, because the very big overview is very generic. So some of the things that stood out to me particularly was the lack of sustainability focus. And that's surprising. The SDG 14, well, the SDGs are a global target, but very few, only 6 of 35 reports reported on progress towards SDG 14. That was really surprising. There is an incomplete futures thinking, and we have scenarios for the ocean. We have ocean acidification, we have sea level rise, we have multiple scenarios, but we don't have tools yet to link them in a comprehensive and cohesive way that allows us to project into the future what kind of ocean do we want and what is the pathway to get there. We need more imagination and more envisioning processes. There was a lack of inclusivity. This is fundamental. The assessments, all of them lacked indigenous and local knowledge. IPCC Working Group 2 included ILK and so did IPOS, but they include them through scientists. And now the processes are emerging, but this is something we really want to work on with IPOS. And then there was a lack of actionability of actions, which is important for policymakers. Actions need to be usable and useful. So I think I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is the conclusion. I wanted to guess that these are some of the quotes from the interviews, which I think are useful to read. There was deep frustration at the science policy interface. Scientists were really frustrated that their science is not being translated into action. And policymakers were really frustrated that they don't understand the science and the science is not useful for them. So there was a lot of energy a lot of passion on both sides, but this frustration that there's a missing piece. There's a link that's not there. And the desire for that link was very evident. It's something that everybody wants on both sides, but it's just not there at the moment. Okay, so if we can move on to the conclusion. Taken together, it's evident that the current global assessment processes and the science policy interface is not yet providing continuous and coherent evidence for sustainability decisions. We are left without a clear compass with which to navigate the future. There are some bright spots though, and I think it's important to note, I think Raphael has already mentioned that there's a lot of momentum for the ocean at the moment and global awareness. And the EU's governance agenda and the actions to build up knowledge have been effective. It's contributed to quite a dramatic reorientation in the ocean space. The scope of the third World Ocean Assessment has a lot of responses to the weaknesses that we've pointed out. There is an intention to try to address many of the weaknesses that we've discussed. IPOS is going to shortly publish an ocean assessment or an ocean report. There is a science policy interface meeting in Paris with the IOC in December, where we will be having a side event. And there is a lot of anticipation around UNOC, political outcomes and scientific outcomes. So along with these shifts, we propose that more coherence and directionality is needed, that there is an urgency now for informed decisions. So we suggest that a dedicated science policy interface is necessary to, as Catherine mentioned, to have a more holistic, integrated approach, to be more action-driven, to provide knowledge in a way that's really actionable and useful and visually engaging for policymakers and for other audiences, and to be more accessible through digital tools, AI, data platforms, and finally, to be more inclusive, to hear all of the voices of the ocean. Thank you so much for attention, and it's great to be here.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and indeed, yes, and indeed, I think it's very important the role that the ocean plays and the need for more inclusivity, systemic change, but also for some forward-looking and action-driven thinking. So next on, we can proceed with broadening up the discussion, welcoming some additional speakers, the first of whom is Mr. Pierre Carleskind. I know that you have a very busy agenda as part of your mission at La Réunion, so thank you very much for joining us remotely today. And of course, you are the chair of Fisheries Committee of PESH Committee in the European Parliament. So my question is with regards to the specific issue of fisheries. As I was wondering, what are the key needs from your point of view for European policymakers towards ocean sustainability? In a way, what are the key topics where knowledge is needed, and also what deliverables would be useful from your side?
Okay, thank you, Elias. First of all, can you tell me if you can hear me well? Is that okay, like that?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Okay, great. So the first thing is I would like to thank really deeply Catherine Chabaud for the organization and for hosting this event, and also for the resolution. You just mentioned the resolution that we have adopted in the plenary session a few months ago, and in which the European Parliament clearly takes position on the question of creating IPOS. And I think that's really a big deal for us. And this was a really funding for foundation resolution for thinking the future of ocean policy in this Parliament and in the European Union in general. The second thing is that I would like to thank the Commission and all the people that realized this feasibility study, this famous escape assessments, really interesting and really at the core at what we have to do to achieve a better ocean policy. You are asking me things about fishery, and fishery, of course, is a good example. Now, how science is key to have a better management. Of course, in Europe, in the continental Europe, because I'm right now in La Réunion, which is the outermost region, one of the outermost regions of Europe, but in the continental Europe, we know that where and when we put science in the decision process, it might work. And we know that we have some results. We have some results on the biomass of fish stock in the Northeast Atlantic Ocean. It's plus 40 to 50% during the 15 last years. So this is because the governments and the council and the decision have better followed the scientific advice. Here in La Réunion, we have the really example, the excellent example of the toothfish in French, c'est la légine, where data have been collected during years and now are really useful for establishing the basis of sustainable management, good management. But I was just talking this morning with fishermen on toothfish, asking and really wondering, and then it's science really wondering on the influence of climate change. And they know that there might be a fewer biomass of toothfish in the Southern Ocean. And we know that, for example, Southern Ocean is a place where might happen some things new with the climate change. The same for Arctic, and Catherine has been really engaged and involved in question about the Antarctic Ocean. And we know that, for example, the lack of knowledge, the lack of possibility to have science leads the politicians to the precocious management, which is sometimes frustrating for the fishermen, which is necessary, of course, but this creates frustration. But in fact, then that has been highlighted by the seascape assessment, is that, of course, we have the IPCC, we have the IPBS, we have a lot of science. Of course, it doesn't cover everything, but we have a lot of science, but we need an ocean approach. And I want to tell you that as a European politician, there is something that is really frustrating. And I had the occasion to tell it several times in the Fishery Committee. We pretend having an integrated approach, an ecosystem approach, but that is not true. I think this is really a lie. This is a lie. The common fishery policy is supposed to rely on an ecosystem-based approach, but the fact is that we still need knowledge. We still need knowledge and understanding, and we need the correct transfer from the science to the politics. And as we pretend having it, it's not clearly true. And it is even more crucial at the international level that we have this possibility to have this ecosystem-based approach, this integrated approach. And this is clearly the crucial point why we need IPOS. I don't want to be much longer because, first of all, I have a busy agenda, honestly, and that I really looking forward to listening to the rest of this conversation. But really, we have many examples in fishery that shows that we must include all this really divided, as you explained in your seascape assessment, really all this divided way for approaching the ocean. But we have this, we really need, if we want to address the real issues that we have, and fishery is really a good example. We have issues on biodiversity, with climate change, of socio-economic questions, of the coastal communities that are implied in that. So IPOS is really crucial to synthesize science and to give a clear view on how we politicians, we can have a real ecosystem integrated approach. So once more, thank you, Catherine, for your really your commitment, because, well, honestly, in less than 1 year, we will leave go to the end of the term. And once more, I really would like you, if you agree, to applaud really warmly and deeply Catherine, who has been so much involved and so much useful for us in this ocean question. So thank you so much.
Just a word. Merci Pierre, mais toi aussi tu fais un travail absolument formidable. I just want to add something, because you are here in La Réunion with our dear colleague Stéphane Bijou, and you and we are trying to push all our colleagues to open the eyes on ocean issues, So thank you to be there in La Réunion with the Commissioner Sinkevicius. He was there at the beginning of the week, if I remember well. Yeah, that's correct. And I can had a word to say that with Pierre, we would like to transform the fisheries, the pêche committee for the next mandate in a integrated policy, maritime policy committee. Why not? I think we need to not to speak only on fisheries in this committee. So I hope you will still be there, Pierre. I won't. And you will still chair this committee. Many thanks to your job as well.
Let's hope. Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also very much on this teaser for the next mandate and what to expect. Of course, there is the urgency for the establishment of IPOS. Unfortunately, there is also the urgency to end the event sharp, because I noticed that there is another event organized at 2:30. So this is also a call for speakers to follow, to please try to stick to the allocated time frame, or perhaps to have 5 minutes in total per speaker when it comes to the ones to follow. I know that this is my role, but I'm also mentioning that. So next one is Ms. Elisabetta Balzi from the European Commission, once again from DGRTD. And of course, DGRTD is responsible for EU policy on research, science and innovation, for when it comes to helping create jobs and growth, but also a lot is about the science policy nexus as well. So I was wondering, from your point of view, how could IPOS support DGRTD's primary objectives? And is there any specific IPOS tools or deliverables that could help you on behalf of DGRTD achieve your mission?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And I would like also to thank from our side, Catherine, very warmly, and congratulate you for having organized this very important debate. Also, many thanks and congratulations to Françoise Gaille and for the excellent study that you have carried out. And as my colleague Raphael already introduced, this issue for us is key, for the European Commission is key. And also from the prospect of research and innovation, you know, our research innovation policy and programs are aiming at supporting European policy priorities. We have one of them, which is certainly a major one, that you know, the European Green Deal. We always say there is no Green Deal without blue. The blue arm of a Green Deal is key, and also we are speaking about a blue deal. So also in research and innovation, we have a key part for the ocean, and you know that in our research and innovation program, Horizon Europe, we are already investing remarkable efforts for ocean research at large. Even in the first 3 years, more than 1 billion euros as a whole. And we have major strategic initiatives like the mission Restore Our Ocean and Waters, which starts from research and innovation but goes far beyond research and innovation. We manage it together with our colleagues from DG Mare. And this is a broad strategic mobilization initiative to involve all the stakeholders at large. You spoke about the communities, the fisheries communities, the local communities, coastal communities. All these are key actors for our mission. And we have many other strategic initiatives also, for example, the All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance from pole to pole. We have partnerships with the member states also investing €500 million on a sustainable blue economy, just to give you some examples. Now, in this process, how can we interact? And I think there is a mutual benefit really that we can build with the prospects that you have with IPOS. We are already interacting very closely with all series of intergovernmental assessment bodies such as IPCC, IPBS, and also many boards, for example, the European Marine Boards. So all the strategic intelligence for us is key, and it's a mutual benefit. So we contribute to those processes. For example, to the IPCC, we are contributing to 10% of the publications referred there are from VU projects. So this is ranked second after the US. And at the same time, the reports which are produced from IPCC or from several boards from a scientific community are key in our strategic programming process. So there is a mutual benefit. And I think this could be also a very important aspect to be taken into account. Now, of course, it's very important also to consider that it's important to be complementary and building on what is already existing. Of course, we mentioned the IPCC. It's already producing very important reports. At the same time, there is a clear need to have this ocean approach as it was just mentioned. I think this is very important also for us to have this systemic approach which cuts across. And so the complementarity and the added value building on the existing mechanism. And this interaction, it is very important, so to have this added value. What is also, last aspect that I wanted to mention is that we are speaking now, I see in the report, we see the results of the interface between science and policies, but it was mentioned also by Catherine, science, policy and society. So for us, also from our program and policies point of view, this is key. We see it, for example, we implemented very strongly in the mission. It's really a broad mobilization initiative. We need society on board since the very early phases and really as actors. So this is also a comment that this science, policy and science as a whole is an interface which would be very important for the ocean, not only science and policies, but society in first row as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Balzi. And of course, perhaps another hashtag, another keyword when it comes to DGRTD's work is coordination. And earlier in April, there was a coalition of scientific institutions in support of the IPOS that aims at ensuring that the science produced is coordinated, inclusive and integrated. So I was wondering, do you see synergies between that coalition and IPOS and DGRTD, sorry? And how do you think IPOS could be effective at an even larger scale for similar political entities?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for this question. This is very important. As I already anticipated, our interactions with the scientific community also is key. And this is example, for example, of the important reports which were just produced by the European Marine Board which are very relevant to our research. So this is very welcome. What I would like to underscore is the importance, it has already been mentioned by many previous speakers, but of a system approach, which is not only interdisciplinary, but really cutting across inclusiveness as well. You mentioned systemic inclusiveness and action-driven. This is very much also our way of acting. So this IPOS or supporting system for an ocean approach should see the ocean really as embedded and contributing to all the policies. So it's not the oceans only as ocean science or not only ocean for fisheries and maritime policies, but ocean for fisheries, maritime, environment, climate, food, energy and sustainable blue economy as a whole. So this is very important that the ocean is seen because it's key for all those policies. It's key for our life because it contributes equally fundamentally to all those policies. So in view of these important initiatives that you're building, it would be very important to consider this integrated approach. But it's not only transdisciplinary, it's really contributing to all different aspects of our life. So also to see the ocean as key across all different policy sectors.
Thank you very much, Ms. Balzi, for your replies. And I think they have honestly stimulated the audience as well, judging by the number of questions received through the online platform. So thank you once again. Our next speaker is Mr. Paul Treguer, oceanographer at the Presidium for the European Academy of Sciences. And I wanted to ask you, well, the science policy nexus is an angle that we heard already today during the event. But I was wondering from your post, how does the European Academy of Science work to strengthen the dialogue between science and policy at the European level?
Okay, let's share the screen. No, sorry. Okay. Well, can see nothing. Please stop sharing the screen. I'm lost. Okay.
You have the presentation open, I think I noticed.
Yes, maybe, well, okay, let's do it again. There we go, perfect, okay. There we go. Okay, so let's say that a few words about the European Academy, and of course I would like to thank Catherine Chabaud for giving a voice to the European Academy of Science, actually based in Brussels. And we are more than 800 fellows, mostly European scientists, and 22% of us being from countries outside Europe, like the USA, India, or China. I'm pleased to inform you that 46 of our fellows are Nobel Prizes, including some of the recently nominated Nobel Prizes. Okay, so you know that the ocean covers more than 70% of the surface area of the planet Earth, which should be called actually planet oceans. And the ocean offers invaluable resources and ecosystem services to humanity. And the ocean used to be the master of climate and regulates climate change, but it is now perturbed. 90% of the excess heat due to the greenhouse gas emission is absorbed by the ocean, and about 30% of the anthropogenic CO2 emissions released in the atmosphere are picked up by the ocean. Without the ocean, the mean temperature of planet Earth would rise much more rapidly, with even more impact on our daily life. Actually, disturbing the ocean equilibrium already affects our daily life. So, sorry. Since 2020, and within the framework of the United Nations Ocean Decade, every 2 years, the European Academy of Sciences, together with Chinese Academy of Sciences, organize Europe-China Frontier Forums on critical issues. And these events actually attract many scientists, not only from Europe and China, but also from the rest of the world. The themes that we debate and on which we try to find solutions to solve the problems are: first, what are the impacts of climate change on the ocean? Ocean temperature is rising as well as sea level, with risks of submersion for many of the European coastal areas. And ocean acidification is ongoing, with impact on the biological resources. And the solution are, first, drastically decrease the greenhouse gas release in the atmosphere, and eventually to help the ocean doing better the uptake of anthropogenic CO2. To rapidly develop renewable energies, including marine renewable energies, and of course to stop funding fossil energies. So, second question, what are the other impacts of anthropogenic activities? As you know, they directly impact the biological resources and the ecosystem services, including the release of pollutants and plastics, macro and microplastics, that are not far from creating a disaster for our marine ecosystem globally, with direct impacts on human beings. And the solutions are, first, to regulate the exploitation of the ocean coastal fisheries, and as shown by Pierre Kariskin, the European Union is really doing a good job along this line. Congratulations. And to stop releasing pollutants, and particularly the plastic. You were referred to the going conference in Kenya. The two academies actually debate on the help that artificial intelligence can provide to build digital twins of the ocean as tool to better marine spatial planning. So, as a European citizen deeply committed in the building of Europe, I believe the role of Europe is crucial at world scale, because we have the scientific knowledge and we know what to do to build a sustainable world. Europe can wait on the international decisions at the highest level. So let's do it. And of course, we strongly support the IPOS initiative. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Treguer. And of course, IPOS is all about knowledge co-construction and coalitions building. So I was wondering, also from your point of view, how would you recommend that the IPOS can expand at the global level?
So I guess it is importantly the phase of extension now of IPOS. And we had a meeting yesterday, actually, and we made some recommendation to extend the, I should say, also ask for support, for instance, for institutions belonging to Canada or the USA, for instance, but also paying attention to the South Hemisphere, of course. And our point of view also, from the US point of view, I should say, is to pay attention to the economical actors, okay? Because they are, of course, key actors in when we are to implement decisions, especially for climate change and biodiversity. We have to use the support to engage also the economical actors. And so at world scale, that's very important. And I guess you can ask, given his network at a world scale level, okay? And so we are, of course, trying to help IPOS to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to give a fresh plot twist in the agenda to provide the floor to our ambassador, Mr. Olivier Poivre-Davaux. I know that you have a busy program for today, and it's an honor to have you with us today at the event. And of course, you have a prominent role as the French ambassador for the poles and maritime issues. So I wanted to ask you, since France will host the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice in 2025, of course, the need for the delivery of IPOS has been identified as key. Could you please walk us through the anticipated deliverables from IPOS at the Ocean Conference?
Thank you so much, Willie. Yes, I'm in fact also the special envoy, the French president for Ocean, and being with him now in Switzerland for a state visit. So I'm very pleased to be part of this debate, and I'd like to thank really Catherine Chabaud. As you know, very good ideas need time to germinate. So, but they also need attentive gardeners. And IPOS is an idea that Dr. Gale saw at the One Ocean Summit in Brest during the European French presidency in February 2022. And thanks to President Macron and also to La Présidente Madame von der Leyen, and 3 years later, each will germinate at the third UNOC in Nice in June 2025. IPOS will be one of the two scientific deliverables of UNOC 25, co-hosted, as you know, by my country and Costa Rica. You know, now I would say that IPOS is strongly supported by many states of the European Union, and also more states outside the EU and abroad, and has received everywhere precious backing of the European Commission, of DG Mare, and I'm very grateful in particular. Why? Because they all stand for production of knowledge that directly inform political decision makers working towards virtuous governance of the oceans. This is not the case today. We should be clear on that. Production of ocean knowledge is sound and huge, but far too fragmented, not centrally available, and intended to experts, essentially. To work in that direction, we need to strengthen link with the other major scientific reports that are in the UN World Ocean Assessment, or the IPCC for climate and IPBES for biodiversity, and many others. So in order to aggregate ocean knowledge and make it accessible and actionable by decision makers. So in the next 18 months leading to June for the UNOC 25, a great deal will be happening. First, the OSF Foundation, forerunner of IPOS, led by Dr. Gale, will be working to deliver its first general report at UNOC's One Ocean Science Congress, as well as 3 thematic reports: offshore wind, the deep ocean, and fisheries resource management. I also expect IPOS to propose simple ocean metrics targeting ocean health, such as the IPCC did by recommending to limiting global warming to 1.5 degree. The consortium appointed by the European Union within normally 3 weeks, I think, to work on the call towards an intergovernmental panel for the ocean will submit its conclusions on the recommended governance for IPOS, so that the structure can be yet operational from June 25, either as an international organization or as an intergovernmental body within a UN structure. So IPOS must be a working identity for the fourth UN Ocean Conference by 2028. So we must have consolidated all these deliverables by June 25 for ocean action to be multiplied and reinforced through the necessity that is ocean science. And I will say it again, in these 18 months that lie ahead of us, we have great responsibility, and I personally trust the IPOS and Professor Gale to help us create this tool, this so important tool that we so desperately need to go forward with an ambitious plan to protect the ocean at a global scale. Thank you.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, Excellence, j'ai une question, Olivier, supplémentaire, c'est Catherine. You organized last week in Paris the One Planet Summit for the Pole, and science was there, a lot of scientists. It was for more science because we need to know those regions, very important for a lot of reasons. Can you say just a word for the necessity that we have to have more science on this topic? And congratulations, it was a very, very wonderful event and très réussi.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We had the pleasure to spend 3 days working on a cryosphere, which is for a lot of people a new issue, in fact, which is a so important one. And as you know, we are facing a drama. I'm not exaggerating, you know, in let's say by 2050, there will be 1 billion people under the water, not all the body, you know, but the feet probably, mainly regional coastal countries, small islands, developing countries, states, and so that will be the first effect of the climate change and the rise of the sea level, which is for half of the part the cause of the melting of the ice. And what we were discussing last week was also this collapse of cryosphere everywhere, which is not only on the poles, I mean in Greenland or Antarctica, but also in the glaciers. And the glaciers and the melting of ice in the glaciers will affect another 1 billion people, which are going to lack of water, electricity, and agricultural activities. So we are facing really something which will affect in the next 50 years 2 billion people. And how we know that? We know that because we during these 3 days we had in Paris at the Museum of Natural History, we have asked a bunch of 12 scientific with 300 other scientists to work on that. They have been working all the summer, and they just produced for us the report, the statement on the cryosphere, which come after, you know, as you know, the IPCC report, which was published in 2019 on ocean and cryosphere. And this updated statement on cryosphere was very impressive for all of us, because the situation is getting worse and worse, especially in Greenland, as we know, but also in Antarctica, which is the changing point. In fact, if the Antarctica melt, as you know, it's something like 55 meters high of sea level rise we will have. It's not for tomorrow, but it's for the day after tomorrow. And I should say that we have 2 days devoted to science and only half day devoted to the leaders, because the leaders, they just have to read the 20 pages written by the scientists, and they decided all together to create a coalition of countries. They decided also to ask UNESCO and WMO, World Meteorological Organization, to create a decade from 2025 to 2034 dedicated to the polar and glacial science. So again, we will have more science, and we do need science, and it's the best way also, you know, in a world which is very complex. But the world was always complex, to be honest. If you want to work with China, if you want to work with India, if you want to work with BRICS, we have to make science together. And if we share the same point of view with the scientists, and that was the case, the president of China, who is a scientist, was in Paris last week, and he had exactly the same vision of us about the melting of the ice and the cryosphere. And thanks to that science consensus, we have also a political consensus, which is most important. I do hope that will be the case for the Ocean UN conference in Nice in 2 years' time. But again, Europe has played a major role when at the One Ocean Summit, Madame van der Leyen came and said, we will support the digital twin of the ocean Mercator. And when the EU support and the GDMR, the launch of IPOS, it's absolutely crucial. And I would like to thank all of you for having made this very important step on our way. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier.
Thank you.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, and science is a tool for diplomacy, as I heard. So thank you very much. And see you very soon in Tanger, I think.
Yes, absolutely. In one day.
In one day. So merci beaucoup.
Merci.
À toi.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador. And of course, we're all very much looking forward to the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice in 2025. Of course, there is a long road ahead, but it looks very promising and inspiring. And another angle that we haven't touched upon, but was mentioned previously within the seascape assessment, was the need to improve the engagement of indigenous and local communities' knowledge. So turning to Mr. Brian O'Riordan, I was just wondering what challenges and opportunities would you see there, and how could IPOS support and facilitate this engagement?
Thank you very much. I'm Brian O'Riordan. I'm the policy advisor for the Low Impact Fishers of Europe, which is a European platform representing something like 32 associations from 15 member states across Europe. Small-scale fisheries in Europe provide something like 50% of the workplaces, 70% of the fleet, but only 5% of the catch. And here in Europe also, we're very dependent on the rest of the world for the fish that we eat. 70% of the fish we eat comes from other countries of the world. So our fisheries in Europe, although, as pointed out, are improving in some areas, still have major challenges. But what are the challenges of including the knowledge? Because what you're talking about is creating this centralized hub, which will be able to have the knowledge of what's happening in the oceans, the scientific knowledge, the knowledge about governance schemes and so on, and creating the global scale plan that the ambassador was referring to earlier. Small scale fisheries operate in a very different kind of a way. They're operating very much at the local scale. They are right on the sharp end, if you like, of the interaction between human society and the oceans on the one hand. They're experiencing climate change, the impacts of global warming. They have what's known as traditional ecological knowledge, but also they're going to sea every day. They live next to the sea. They have an amazing resource of experiential knowledge, as well as a particular way of looking at the sea. Their way of looking at the sea and the way they analyze what's going on is very different to the science, and the way that science is looking at the sea and getting data. The fishers have their own language for describing things in the sea, which UNESCO recently defined as biocultural diversity. So the question is how can this ocean hub tap into this very diverse, widespread, decentralized source of knowledge and information? And it really is at the heart of what you want to do, which is co-creating knowledge. So you have the science knowledge, the fishers have the local experiential knowledge. So that is the major challenge. So just to describe how the way that fishers look at the oceans and what they're calling for and what IPOS is trying to do, you're on a kind of converging pathway. IPOS was born, as I understand it, out of the last United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon, 2022. 20, it's a small number, only 20 small-scale fishers from across 6 continents also came to the last UNOC. And before coming there, they had shared experience, thanks very much to the support of NGOs, communicators, and so on. And they came up with what they described as a call to action. So I think the first place for IPOS to begin is to look at this call to action produced by these representatives of small-scale fishers from Latin America, Asia, Africa, Europe, North and South America. And along with that, they produced a kind of rules of conduct for working with small-scale fishers, because small-scale fishers are very difficult to work with directly. I mean, I'm not a small-scale fisher, but I represent certain European fishers. They're out there working, catching fish. That's what fishers do. So how would IPOS engage directly with fishers who have a completely different kind of dynamic? Where do you meet them? How do you communicate with them? How do you communicate with them in their own language, in concepts and so on that they know and understand? So I think there are certain examples that you can follow. There's a long history of centralized institutions, the UN, FAO in particular, going back to 1984 and the World Conference on Fisheries Development and Management, where small-scale fishers were outliers. And gradually they've come into the center and seen as, you know, the key actors of change, key actors in determining policies. So the first milestone for me was the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, then followed up with the small-scale fishery guidelines. So there's a whole process of trying to institutionalize, if you like, the voices of small-scale fishing communities through different kinds of mechanisms. But at the heart of that, I think we have to remember, is this principle or value, if you like, no decisions without us. So for IPOS to go ahead and develop its knowledge without the small-scale fisheries would be unacceptable. So you really have to find ways of including them. So nothing to the right for them to be able to voice their views in their own way, in their own language. I mean, these are big challenges, but they're not insurmountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe in just around a minute, how would you see IPOS to interact with practitioners to envision new pathways when it comes to ocean sustainability?
Sorry, that's another question. How would they interact? Well, I think you would need to establish a special mechanism for doing that. And it wouldn't be kind of using proxies or the internet. Somehow you have to find a mechanism where you engage them directly, whether it's through your local representatives. I mean, my personal engagement with IPOS has been through your colleague, Leopoldo Gerhardinger from Brazil, who I've known for many years and been engaged with in various kind of policy forums. So I think, you know, you have to plug into these different policy forums. You have to have your representatives in different countries who are able to engage directly with the fishers yourselves, because clearly, as this centralized hub, wherever you're going to be based, it's going to be impossible for you to have direct contact with the fishers on the ground.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Ryden. And our last but not least speaker at this panel discussion of today is Ms. Geneviève Pons, CEO and Vice Chair of Europe Jacques Delors. And my question to you is, what are the key pathways to overcome existing limits and barriers to policy actions? I understand that IPOS is, of course, one of the key answers there. And of course, it would be great if you could also let us know how could IPOS collectively find an equivalent global metric for the ocean, as we had the inclusion of the 1.5 degree criteria in the Paris Agreement, and how could IPOS all in all mobilize civil society engagement?
Thank you very much. And big thank you to Catherine for having organized this event and for having invited me, and a big thank you for Françoise for her continuous fight for the IPOS, and congratulations to Tanya for the very interesting assessment. Very glad to be with you today. So yes, I am now heading a think tank, Europe Jacques Delors. But to answer your questions, I will rely on a very, very old experience. Because before heading a think tank, I've been a member of the cabinet of Mr. Jacques Delors, President of the European Commission, and I was in charge of environment. And I've been also heading WWF European Office. So I have fought myself a lot of battles. And what I want to tell you is that there are a lot of common features between these battles. To answer your first questions, what are the barriers? What are the limitations to policy action? I would give two very similar ones, actually, and very vast. Vested interest and national interest. So when you have a battle here in the European Union or elsewhere, you have to ask yourself the question, what are the vested interests that will be affected? What are the national interests that will be affected? And you will see the resistances coming from that. If it is about tackling plastic production, you will see plastic producers resist. If it is about chemicals, you will see chemical producers resist, and so on and so forth. And of course, you have big states which are not in the hands of these vested interests. No, this would be much too simple, but sensitive to them. So these are the barriers. And of course, if there is a gap in scientific knowledge, if there are contradictions in scientific assessments, then there is a way for these vested interests and for the states, there is a way to defend their point of view. I will give you 3 examples. Glyphosate. Glyphosate, there is one scientific institute which is not in agreement with others. And so it gives people who are still producing glyphosate or using glyphosate arguments not to stop it. I give you another example. Take the farm to fork strategy. There is one research institute linked to the European Commission which has given as possibilities the loss of a big part of the international market if we apply the farm to fork strategy. And this has been used, of course, to resist the objective of the farm to fork strategy. And finally, the Southern Ocean MPAs, so the vast marine areas around Antarctica. China is resisting their protection and putting into question science. And now we see the way to overcome that. We have to put the Chinese with us and to create science with us. And so we will progress together with them. So that's the first question you have put to me. And the second one, I have to take my glasses on. It was about how could Yes, it was about global metrics and mobilization of civil society around these metrics. So global metrics, I am not a scientist. So I am not the one who will answer in a pertinent manner to this question. However, I listened to Paul Tréguet. And so he suggested a certain number of criteria. So I guess that temperature could be one, acidification could be another. And he spoke also about, of course, sea level rise. And we could also speak about MPAs, because these are engagements that have been taken by states around the world, and we should monitor the way it is applied. So this will be for the scientists to choose these metrics. But then what is important that it is translated in the international agreement that will be concluded, hopefully in Nice, and in national contributions. So if they are included in national contribution, then they can be monitored by scientists, and they can be monitored also by civil society, because civil society has to be there. And it is something I like in your concept of the IPOS, is that not only policymakers are part of it, and the recommendation and the scientists will make recommendations that policymakers will be able to use. But if civil society is involved, the impact will be much stronger, because they can be very vocal. And there is something that strangely Olivier omitted to signal. In the One Planet Polar Summit last week, civil society were there. And civil society were there in support of scientists, and not to contradict scientists, but to support their message. So it's a really good idea to involve civil society. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Geneviève. We are a little bit in a hurry. The problem we have is there is another event that begins here in a few minutes at 30. So you will conclude, Tanya, just a word to say that one thing I have listened today is co-creating knowledge. And Geneviève, you spoke about civil society, but indigenous people were there too. Yeah. It was tremendous. So thank you very much. I just want to tell you that there is a lot of people around in the room. Your team, the IPOS team, is there. I wanted to connect people. So we have also the representative from Caroline Roos, our colleague from the Greens, and some other people from. There is also, because we were speaking about the pole, Elsa Etienne. She's working on a very famous project, the Polar Pod. She's the wife of a very famous French explorator, Jean-Louis Etienne. Many thanks, Elsa, to be here. And a lot of, sorry, I don't know all your names, but you can connect outside the room. You can take, I know it's too late. Thank you very much for, yeah. And Tanya, the floor is yours for the conclusion.
Thank you. Well, clearly our work is not over. We have a very busy 18 months ahead of us, lots to do, lots of ambition, lots of passion, lots of commitment, and we are looking forward to it. I would encourage everyone that's here to please feed back to us your suggestions about IPOS. We want to co-construct with you. We want to be useful. We want to be delivering solutions that work. So your input is welcome. We would love to engage with you. And we have a website now, www.ipos.earth. So you can connect with us there if you don't already know us. Thank you, Catherine, for this event. And thank you to everybody who is here to join us. Thank you, Françoise.
And there were a lot of people online. How many? About
A little
75?
less than 100.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Paul Tréguer en ligne. Oui, merci.
Beaucoup, Catherine. À bientôt. À bientôt.